Good evening, everyone on Facebook. Welcome to RTO Doctors 30 Days, 30 Tips, and welcome to you also if you're joining us from LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're joining us from this evening. I'll try and make it a quick one this evening on financial viability because we had such a lengthy 30 Days, 30 Tips yesterday with Bruno Cozzi from Blue Gem in relation to RTO software, and we have another lengthy one coming up in a few days' time with Lauren Hollows from Understand TAE on trainer and assessor competency in currency, which should be great too. But today I just wanted to talk about financial viability for a moment because it doesn't cease, it never ceases to amaze me really that in this volatile market and this ridiculously stringent regulatory environment that we operate in, it doesn't surprise me, well it does actually surprise me, how many RTOs still have all their eggs in one basket. In other words, they get all of their revenue or their income from one source. And the reason why that surprises me is because in today's market, which is so volatile, anything could change from one day to the next. And with so many frequent changes at a policy level, as we'll discuss very briefly a little bit further on down the track, funding can be pulled away at any moment in an RTO's registration and cause the collapse of an RTO. And many providers saw this with the Vet Fee Help program. When the Minister pulled the pin on that program, there were many closures and tens of thousands of students who were displaced because the RTO could no longer afford to remain financially viable and provide the courses that they had contracted to students. And so I guess I just wanted to take a moment tonight to remind people of the multitude of ways that you can generate income as an RTO, and that you should really be diversifying and having a few eggs in each basket rather than having everything in one. And it's not bad advice for other people outside the RTO space. So even for consultants like myself, other businesses generally, actually, it's probably not bad advice. But the examples that I will give are specific to RTOs. The obvious one is to have some market in the vet student loan market. Now, with applications opening up very soon for the second round, people will have an opportunity to apply for that if their scope of registration is eligible. There are the typical government-funded programs at a Commonwealth and a state level. Some of the most common ones that people often refer to are the PPP programs, CABS programs, state government programs. Then, of course, you've got your fee-for-service clients, and they are the ones that you should always be having, no matter how much government funding you receive. You should always have fee-for-service students. You've got apprenticeships and traineeships. You've got non-accredited courses that do not fall under ASQA's tax or VRQA's jurisdiction. So if a course is non-accredited, you can run it and make sure that it is very clearly differentiated between your nationally recognised training, and that can also keep you going during times of suspension or while you're waiting for your RTO registration to be approved, things like that. There's also things like CRICOS registration. You can apply to have your RTO CRICOS registered and tap into the CRICOS market. You can also deliver offshore, and you can also deliver ELICOS programs, English language programs. So there's a whole range, and they're just some examples, but there's a whole range of different examples of ways that you can generate income so that not all of your income is contained in the one source. So if something goes wrong and the government funding is pulled, for example, your RTO is not at risk, and therefore your mortgage and everything else that you've invested into it. Tied to all of this, though, is a concept that I'm actually going to steal from the pastor of my church this afternoon, Tim Healy. He spoke about belief and trust, and it made me think about the vocational education training space and the Cricos market, particularly in the recent few days. There was a newspaper article saying that the international student market in Western Australia is starting to decrease quite significantly, and it's as a result of changes in migration and the vet sector generally speaking, and it made me start thinking about belief and trust in terms of, if you have no belief in yourself and you don't have belief in your brand and you don't have belief in your staff and you don't have belief in your students, then how will your students, staff and yourself, how will you all trust yourself to deliver the programs that you want to deliver and that are going to be meaningful to your clients? But it also made me start thinking about the system. Now, if all of us as stakeholders don't have belief and trust in the system that we're operating in, it leaves us all in a very vulnerable position financially, but also from a place of, is what we're offering actually going to be meaningful to the people we're offering it to? And I guess it just made me think that if you and your stakeholders don't have faith or trust and belief in yourself and what you're providing, your business concept, and you don't have belief and trust in the system, then your RTO is probably not going to be financially sustainable anyway. It will only last a short duration of time. And at a time when employers and the community and the vet industry are themselves questioning their own belief and trust in the system, your own belief and trust is more critical than ever in your own product and your own capability than it ever has been. And there's a few reasons why I say that, but I'll just briefly touch on them this evening. And I think the biggest one for me is that I don't think I've ever seen an education sector that has been under so much scrutiny as the vocational education training sector. Perhaps the early childhood sector, but I don't believe that we have seen it in a sector related to the Australian Qualifications Framework. So when you look at the primary school sector or the secondary school sector, we've certainly not seen this amount of scrutiny and interference from government bureaucrats and the like, and we certainly don't see it at a university higher education level. And I guess what I was thinking about when it came to this was that the sector is continuing to be a political and an economical football that is passed around for the betterment of some bureaucrats' careers, and it's also being exploited in some ways by those operators that we know are exploiting loopholes in the system. But is it really their fault when we live in a very financially motivated society where those loopholes were left there from previous governments or current governments through sheer negligence? That's a topic for another day, but I guess the ultimate issue that I wanted to point out is that the sector just continues to be that political football that is being shoved around from A to B to C to D, and I don't think there's been another sector in the Australian qualifications framework sectors that has ever been under so much scrutiny. Now, the price to pay, of course, for that level of scrutiny is that what I'm seeing more and more is that experts in their field, in other words, RTO providers, RTO owners who are experts in their field, are actually engaging highly specialised consultants like myself, for example, and lawyers just to confirm the compliance of what they're doing, but they're already experts. They're already industry experts recognised in their fields, and they have been for many, many years, some of them decades. And for some of them, they've been delivering and assessing these programs for decades, and nobody until recently, when this whole vet system became this political and economical football, ever questioned the integrity of the job that they were doing. You look around at the graduates that they graduated maybe 5 years ago, and people were happy with the quality of those graduates. Employers, industries were happy with the quality of those graduates. The only people who seem to have a grudge with what is going on are the regulators, who don't seem to have a clear understanding of what industry actually want, instead of ticking boxes and making sure that something is legally compliant. And so in this volatile market, what I'm seeing more and more is that industry experts are losing that belief and trust in themselves, and they're questioning their own capability more and more. And it's costing them a significant amount of money that is compromising the financial viability of their RTO. One of the other things that I just wanted to finish up on was that people, communities, and other long-time contributors of the vocational education training sector have lost faith in themselves, and they've lost faith in the providers and the RTOs, and they've lost faith in the sector. We're seeing valuable assets, and I talk about people as assets, and it's wrong for me to do that, but we have almost what we call living treasures in our vocational education training sector who have walked away. We have experts in various industries who were specialists in their field and leaving a legacy for people in their industry for the future, to ensure the future sustainability of their employment prospects and industry areas, their jobs and so forth. And they're leaving the sector, or they've left the sector because it is just not financially viable to continue to get specialist consultants and lawyers to check to make sure that something is compliant and is going to pass an audit, when what they've been doing for the last 20 years has been perfectly fine. It's been endorsed worldwide in some cases. But it's a regulator here in Australia who has no understanding, no comprehension of what's actually involved in the delivery and assessment of this training, that is sitting there making their life incredibly difficult, to the point where it's no longer financially viable for them to offer that training. And so I say to you, please think about the types of training and assessment that you're offering in your RTO, and please do not put all of your eggs in one basket, because this sector currently is too volatile to ensure the future sustainability of your organisation, where policy changes happen like some people change their undies, and the impact of having your eggs all in one basket in such an environment can cripple you as an organisation. It can mean the displacement of all of your students and impact the community at a much greater level than what any of us ever imagined. So in terms of financial viability, I hope that somebody who is involved in this VET reform is listening and trying to understand the impact that the interference of, or the ongoing scrutiny of, this sector is having on people's lives and the community's lives. And while scrutiny is great when it's done properly, it becomes a problem when it's not, and the power is being exploited. And currently we have a situation, in my opinion, where the power is being exploited and the job's not being done properly. It's only until recently that we've had this question about the integrity of the training and assessment that's taken place in the vet sector. Have a look at your roads. Have a look at the dental hygienist next time you go to the dentist. Have a look at your shop assistants. Have a look at your restaurant staff. Have a look at your traffic management people. Have a look at your people who are working as cabin crew. You know, all of these people are employed, people on mine sites, you know, all these mine workers, your cleaning operations staff, all of these people were trained and assessed in the vet sector, and they have been for many, many years, and industry has been incredibly grateful and satisfied with that training. So I beg the question, why is vet still being the political football that it is and having an impact on financial viability of RTOs the way that it continues to do? I leave you with that thought this Sunday evening, quite a long one after me saying that it was going to be short. I hope that tonight's tip of maintaining financial viability and some strategies for how you can do that have been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Thanks very much, and bye for now.